Welcome back, everybody, to the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC. I am Connor Johnston, joined yet again by Maeve O'Rourke, and we are here for some lovely matches brought to you by GG Tour, Elgato, and Metafi, as always. And for me, this game's going to be a bit of deja vu, given the teams that we just saw on that team preview there.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's exactly what you and Ben Kiriakou got to see last game with that team from Thailand. And I think it is really great to see players on teams using the same team together because it really does show the strength of being able to team build with people on your own team and having the opportunity to practice using a team and building a team together, because that's oftentimes where a lot of really great team compositions come out. So I'm excited to see this team once again in action. And I think, it's going to be playing against a team that is possibly a little bit different, but it's always fun to see a bit of a weather war as well. And the Yveltal that we saw in that last game that we'll see again today, I think is going to be really great, because we saw Nils Dunlop ran something pretty similar both last week and also at Worlds. So it's fun to see kind of these trainers bring something that we've been able to see a little bit more on stream as of recent, and it feels kind of like a newer adaptation to the metagame.
Yeah, and it's always nice to see these new adaptations of the metagame. 'Cause, a lot of players, they often, at the end of the metagame, will be like, oh, we'll just pick what won Worlds or what did good at Worlds to kind of throw that at the wall and see what sticks. But then these players in this format, because we've had the Dynamax, because we've had all these different changes, it feels quite good. You can just say, oh, here's a Pokemon that could be good in this slot. We'll throw that on there. And, it's just going to be something that could possibly bring France back from this 2-0 deficit that they have seen at the start of this matchup.
Yeah, and something I think is really interesting as well, right? If you're Narawitch and you're playing against Yale, you know that your team building partner, Papon, just won with this same team, right? So that has to probably feel pretty good moving forward. The nice thing as well, because we do get to watch these in the order they were played, you have to imagine maybe there was a little bit of conversation between the players of, this is what worked really well for me, this was my game plan for games 1, 2, and 3, and here's kind of what I ended up facing, how they maybe prepped and built for it. So here, it gives you a nice kind of set of communication between you and your teammates, and have the opportunity to say, all right, so I didn't bring this Pokemon with me and it didn't do exactly what I was hoping that it would. And this may be, here's how much damage that this did to, the Zacian or something like that. So I think it's going to be really great for us to be able to kind of see it. And I think also one reason I'm really excited, Nara, which we've been able to feature on stream quite a few times as he has his own capture card, but this is going to be our debut for Yale Gasaan from France. So I'm excited to see how he performs on stream. I know there are only, I believe, 2 players that in this entire group of 14 that we have not been able to haven't been able to feature on stream yet, which is truly a testament to these players for having these capture cards. And of course, we're very thankful for it. But, if we get to take a look between the 2 players that we will be featuring, you can kind of get a look and see their accomplishments. I think there's quite a lot to be said for each of them. Yale Lille Regionals top 4 this year, and the Longjumeau Regionals finalist and seniors in 2016, whereas Narawitch has a lot of really great recent results as well.
Yeah, Narawitch, having a lot of, Victory Road online-based events, as me and Ben were saying in the last game, a lot of these players, especially in the Eastern world, haven't had that breakthrough of the tournament system we have here. They had a bit of a switch up, but, thankfully we have our lovely friends here at Victory Road just to help players like that get that go ahead. And of course, we've seen Narawitch has had World Cup competitor, came really high up in the Sinnoh Open, which I believe was actually a BDSP tournament, which is always good to see because it's very, a bit of a freshen up. And of course, Series 12 Challenge Top 32, which is quite relevant to the format we have now. And they are a finalist in Thailand Nationals, which could be something that really puts a bit of pressure onto Yale, thinking, I'm facing against nearly a national champion. And, given, they've been behind against Thailand right now, that's going to be a lot of pressure too.
Absolutely. Definitely a nice bit of pressure is definitely the right word for it, because you're facing down a team that we just saw do really well, going to be that Kyogre, the Yveltal, Reggie, Aleki, Amoonguss, Rillaboom, and Incineroar, but Yale bringing a team that he's actually brought to the World Cup before, bringing this almost Rinya's son with the Zacian, Groudon, Incineroar, Charizard, Grimmsnarl, but a Thundurus instead of something like a Gastron. And Gastron would be a Pokemon that you may like to have here, especially going against this Kyogre. But a Thundurus does do quite similar things, while also not maybe worrying about, while also maybe giving you a little bit more option to deal with something like a Rillaboom on the opposite side, especially with something like a Max Airstream. So I think it's going to be a little interesting. I think this is one of those matchups where having a best of 3 is really nice, because I think we'll get to see a couple of different sides to each of these teams.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to see it. Of course, as we're kind of seeing behind the scenes for our like little spreadsheets and stuff, Narawitch has built this to counter the Rinja Sun sort of archetype, probably knowing that Yale had brought it, quite often in the past. But we also saw that even though it was a counter team, the Thunderous that we saw last game as well was a big problem for the team Narawitch is bringing, given that it can kind of put a pressure if you want to go for Electro Web. It can do some big damage to the Yveltal and the Kyogre. So maybe that's something that if they kind of talk to each other between their games, they did learn about the damage rolls. As we see something again, even more deja vu coming from the side of the screen here, as we have the Regieleki plus Yveltal in front of Zacian and Grimmsnarl. So something we don't often see. That's something we commonly see on the big screen of VGC.
Yeah, and one thing that you guys saw right in that matchup last time was that Regieleki Dynamaxed early on with that Life Orb. It did a ton of damage with really any type of with a Max Lightning. If you don't have to face something like a Gastron in the back, you may feel slightly more comfortable to go for something like that. However, the threat is still that Groudon, right? You can still switch into Groudon and maybe not have to take something like a Max Lightning, maybe stall out at least one of those turns of Dynamax. But the Dynamax coming out first thing for Narawitch is going to be that Yveltal this turn. It is not going to be that Regieleki. And you guys saw exactly how much that this did. Having the Black Glasses as an option as well, continuing to boost up the power of those Dark type moves along with that Dark Aura makes this Yveltal a really big threat, and it does make it so that the Zacian who's going to protect probably a little bit scared, especially in the face of something that could have been a foul play. Regieleki this turn, Grimmsnarl this turn actually going for a Light Screen though to try and stop some of the damage coming out. Electro Web will connect onto that Grimmsnarl most likely, as long as it does. Actually, no, that I completely just commentator's cursed that so poorly. And then Max Airstream from the Yveltal into the Grimmsnarl is not going to be enough to get a knockout, but still does a nice chunk of damage.
Yeah, Yale going for that Light Screen, thinking, hey, most of these Pokemon are special. If they battled at a different time to their French teammates, they could have thought maybe there was a switch up between Narawitch's team and Papon's team, but it seems not to be, given how much damage that did. A Protect, though, kind of annoying, and the miss even more annoying for Narawitch, because, that could have been a Gone Grimmsnarl, and now you could just get a Reflect up, which is going to be irritating, not to say the least, for these physical attackers as well as special attacking prowess on Narawitch's team. But hopefully we can see a breakthrough, because just getting those speed drops on Zacian, is going to be something that is going to be scary nonetheless, because it's going to keep it slower, meaning your Yveltal can go faster, and when you get those foul plays off, that's going to be a nice bit of damage that could lead to a knockout. Of course, we could, could see Yale read into that, maybe get Incineroar in to soak up some of those hits, or maybe the Charizard likes to take foul plays as special attacker. Intimidate coming out though is going to weaken any damage coming out from that side of the field, and just put fake out pressure for when turns do change. Airstream also coming out, just going to finish off that Grimmsnarl, make it so we have a +2 Yveltal, and and it's going to be very speedy and bulky in front of the Zacian.
Yeah, Grimmsnarl did not go for a move that would have involved Prankster, right? But if you're Narawitch, you say, okay, so my first method of speed control did not connect, I'll bring something that absolutely does. Play rough into the Incineroar, though, is a great way to try and get some extra damage off. Did well over 50% to the Incineroar on the opposite side of the field. Does mean at that point, like you said, you do have to contend possibly with a fake out, but having Yale bring in his Thunderous maybe afterwards instead of in the face of this Incineroar is actually a great boon to Narawitch, because he's not sending out something that can maybe activate that Defiant boost on the Thunderous on the opposite side of the field. The Thunderous, though, does give you the opportunity to go for something like a Dynamax and Max Lightning into that Yveltal. Still going to do a good chunk of damage. Incineroar probably not able to do a whole lot to it at this point, especially. You can get a Fake Out off onto the Zacian, maybe stop something like a Behemoth Blade and get off a Max Darkness now that you have that Airstream boost. But if you get off a Max Darkness, then you're also changing their stats. So you may still have to just kind of force yourself into clicking Max Airstream every single turn of your Dynamax, and maybe not get out the power that you were hoping for. The nice thing as well about the Grimmsnarl getting knocked out before it was possibly able to set something like a Reflect does mean at that point as well that you're not decreasing the power of your foul play even further. Max Airstream from the Yveltal, though, into the Thunderous does a really nice little quarter chunk of damage of that Dynamax HP, and is going to once again boost the speeds, and by getting a boost on your side, you're not messing with the attack stat of that Thunderous on the opposite side of the field.
Yeah, just avoiding getting that damage drop. It would have been nice to get the really strong Dark Aura damage off, but just playing it safe and go for that Airstream, also meaning that you could run the risk reward of being faster with the Incineroar later down the line. As you see it double up into Yveltal, but it tanks it and lives in the red, which could be very useful going on further in the game, of course, it will be going small sooner than the Thunderous, which you do see is Life Orb. And the parting shot going out onto the Incineroar, from the Incineroar, sorry, is going to mean that there's another neutralization onto that Zacian, and it's going to be doing less and less damage. And depending on what comes in here, we could see a bit of a, you could see either of the defensive players. Regieleki, very offensive, it's got electric typing, can do a lot of damage to these Pokemon. Or we have the Kyogre could come in and just start hitting its really powerful water attacks. And with no Gashaan on this build of Rinia, no, it's going to be really nice at the right time of the game. You see Yveltal is forced to go small because of his Dynamax turns ending. And we can see what the players opt for. It is going to, the Narawitch is going to be the +2 with that, with the Yveltal, and it's going to be a super fast Regieleki as well. So damage is going to be going left, right, and center. But will it be enough to thwart these Pokemon sitting right in front of it?
Max Guard from the Thunderous, though, not wanting to take any type of electric type attack from the Regieleki, who also protects on his own here, trying to, once again, I think, stall out some more turns. Yveltal going for a Tailwind is a huge boon at this point as well for Narawitch, because that allows maybe for his Kyogre to come in and still be faster and keep up with the speed, thanks to that Max Airstream on the opposite side of the field. This Behemoth Blade from the Zacian into that Yveltal did not target into that Regieleki, so Regieleki kind of able to sit a little bit more comfortably as of this turn. No Max Lightning as well, I think, from the Thunderous on the opposite side does make this a little bit tougher, because now if you send in something that may not want to take that damage, you may still have to send in the Kyogre, because if you bring in your Incineroar, then you're still giving that Thunderous a boost on the opposite side of the field. So Kyogre coming in, setting up the rain is, I think, going to be pretty nice at this point, but you're still going to have to contend with more Dynamax at least one more turn from this Thunderous. You know, Regieleki can go for something like an Electro Web if it wants to. The Zacian on the opposite side of the field is already currently at -1 for its attack, thanks to both the Parting Shot and the Intimidate, so it's probably not going to want to hang out on the field for much longer, and it switches out, bringing in Groudon, who is a Pokemon that loves to face down Regieleki and is happy to get the sun up in front of this Kyogre.
Yeah, it's going to get the sun up, and it is going to kind of slow down the pace of this Kyogre. Might switch out later, but Kyogre is a very strong special attacker, and we know that's not the Assault Vest on this Thunderous, as it does live the Ice Beam comboed with the Rising Voltage. It can get its own Max Lightning off into that Kyogre, who will definitely not like taking that. And that's something, you know, again, is in the micromanagement of things, it's going to be a risk-reward sort of play, because if it protects there, you then give the Regieleki a boost with electric terrain. So with all those boosts that you could be seeing, and even more icing on the cake there, is the live with the Life Orb chip, which means that you're going to be switching in Incineroar. It is going to set off the Defiant ability, which, you know, on most scenarios is going to be very, very bad. But, you know, you're faster with a Regieleki, you can easily click a nice little attack into that, get rid of it. And then Incineroar can maybe start dealing with Groudon, but will it be enough to deal with it? Because you can just then see a Precipice Blades, and both these Pokemon at low HP, you know, are going to be, or have low stats, and are just going to be really annoyed by the nuisance that it causes. So, you know, Yale could just kind of capitalize on that and take out both these Pokemon with a small sway of some rocks on the floor, or we could maybe see just a, you know, some impressive play just going out from Narawitch to just get a nice high roll or burn or whatever possible onto the Groudon. If you do see the Thunderous will go down, and we'll see how much the Celebrits does. It has got the Sun boost, it is Stab, and Groudon does take it fairly well, and there is no burn, unfortunately, meaning that P-Blades, if it hits, is just going to take 2 knockouts if it does get through this berry.
Yeah, Precipice Blades does get that double connect. There is still, like you said, there was the Sugar Berry revealed on that Incineroar, but the Incineroar was already at such low health that it didn't really matter. Narawitch was playing that end game knowing that he needed some Precipice Blades misses and another Flare Blitz hit, maybe a crit as well. But I think for Yale, that's a really great play, knowing that if you can get rid of those big restricteds early, which he did a really good job of doing, then you're in a great position to kind of just send in Groudon, wrap up your endgame. Groudon doesn't have to exactly have the most accurate moves, as long as it can take a couple of hits. You know, that Regieleki's not doing anything onto that Groudon. It's every move that we saw was an electric type move, so that Rising Voltage isn't going to connect, and Electro Web's not really going to do a whole lot of anything to it either. But, you know, at that point as well, you're already losing your Thunderous at that point, but I think the Thunderous did its job, right? It was already all set with its Dynamax turns. It had already knocked out the Kyogre in one hit, which also I think is pretty important if you are Narawitch, because then you need to make sure that you're sending in your Kyogre in a way where you can protect it a little bit better. And whether that means that you go for a different Pokemon as your Dynamax option, like I think the Yveltal was really nice. However, I think you may want to prioritize that Tailwind, maybe send in your Regieleki, go for a Max Lightning of your own, and try and just maybe see if you can use something like Oblivion Wing on the Yveltal and just try and continue to keep your own health up at this point, I think, because, you know, having only the ability to click Max Airstream instead of those boosted up Max Darknesses, thanks to the Thunderous being on the opposite side of the field and putting you in a bit of a back foot position, I think it changes your board state and it changes how you're going to want to play. So if you send in something like the Regieleki where your Dynamax moves do not lower the stats of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, you may be in a better position, but then you're still at the threat of something like that Groudon switching in and negating a whole turn of Dynamax. So I think it's something that Narawitch is going to have to juggle. I think he's going to have to make a couple of difficult reads in that next game as well. And I think, you know, if you're not getting the hit on something like the Electrowebs and allowing that Grimmsnarl to get that attack in that first turn, it does make it difficult. However, Grimmsnarl and Thunderous are the lead this turn, while the same turn of the Yveltal and Regieleki coming out onto this game too.
Yeah, so the lead does change up a little bit for Yale. They are opting to go more for a slightly less offensive pressure lead. Obviously, you are putting a lot more pressure straight away onto the Yveltal, but Thunderous can just go, you know, it doesn't have to go big straight away. It can maybe switch out and just, it was trying to call maybe Incineroar coming in just to kind of stop that Zacian. So Narawitch also playing it safely and just going for that same thing again, but that could have just been some sort of salty comp that is trying to call out, you know, I know it can do well, my teammates have done well this team, you know, can we practice this over and over again and see where it goes? Maybe opting to go for a big Regieleki this time around, just to kind of get that Dynamax power off as much as possible, instead of having to kind of dance around the possibilities of stat drops and which is kind of stat boosts, and also, you know, you just get that sheer presence of power off. But it does also mean that Yveltal isn't doing as much as it normally has to do. You see a Dynamax is going to go off straight away. See who does come out, as it is that the Regieleki actually coming out this time. So, you know, we get to see Narawitch is going for a faster, more offensive play with Regieleki, sitting there and, you know, putting attacks out where it can and getting knockouts that really didn't turn the flow of the game. This return Dynamax does come out from Yale, so things are going to get very spicy in this turn one of game 2.
Yeah, that Thunderous is going to be a great option just to try and also deal with as much damage from the Regieleki on the opposite side. It can also go for a target with a Max Lightning into the Yveltal on the opposite side as well, and most likely get a bunch of damage off if you don't try and protect through it. We know that there is no protect, but the Sucker Punch does a ton of damage. Scary Face onto the Regieleki is going to slow that Regieleki down, however, and also a really interesting reveal of moveset. Max Lightning from the Thunderous onto the Yveltal is enough to get that full knockout, but if that Sucker Punch is enough to get the knockout with Max Lightning on your own end, then I almost feel like that's worth the trade, because then you can send something else in for free, most likely that Kyogre, and then Kyogre can come in. You may still have to play around some weather aspects, especially with that Groudon that could come in on the opposite side, but I think it's going to be a really great way for Narawitch to kind of change up the board state. That Max Lightning is enough to take the knockout as well, thanks to the Max Lightning that was already set up, I think, especially by having that electric terrain boost was pretty crucial, and by the fact that there as well was no screen set up by the Grimmsnarl, I think was nice to have as an option. Now you've got your own Dynamax, you've still got several turns left of it, you can send in your own Pokemon on the opposite side and maybe just try and consistently deal damage. You don't have to worry about something like a Max Guard. Incineroar and Zacian switch in for their fainted partner Pokemon, but I think at this point the Incineroar pretty happy to come in just at this moment.
Yeah, Incineroar is super happy to come in without that Thunderous on the field, meaning it can do its little kitty antics over and over again without any fear. Parting shots, don't have to call a prediction or anything, you just go for it. And as you were saying, that was one of those high risk, high reward Max Lightnings where, yes, you were slowing down the Regieleki with Scary Face, but you were also giving it that buff that it needed before it did the attack, and that could have been a little bit of extra icing on top of the cake that got the knockout onto the Thunderous. And that it could have been, you know, something that has completely changed the game plan for Yale. Of course, you have the Zacian, which is still at neutral and still has this really strong Behemoth Blade into this slightly fragile Regieleki, but Regieleki has its best friend in the electric terrain set up, and it's just going to keep going for attacks. And with only Groudon to be the switch in, you know, you can easily call that out, because you could pivot with that Incineroar to get Kyogre in, and Groudon again is forced out. So we do see the switch from the Grimmsnarl as we see Groudon come in on that slot, which, you know, isn't the end of the world, because Kyogre, it's sat in the back, And if we see a Flare Blitz maybe coming out from this Incineroar, that is going to be amazing into that Zacian. We do see only, though, a Fake Out goes into the Groudon, possibly predicting a Protect. The Sacred Sword will come out too and do a nice bit of chunk to the Incineroar. And see what this Max Lightning does in return. It goes into the right slot, so calling the switch very well. And with that terrain, with that Life Orb and that boost from Transistor, that is goodbye to the Zacian, and a completely different pace to what we saw in Game 1, very reminiscent to what we saw in the previous match where this team was also used.
Regieleki is pretty happy right now. It has gotten rid of the Pokemon that I think were the biggest threat to that Kyogre in the back. The Incineroar, like we saw last game with the Flare Blitz in the rain, or sorry, in the sun, did a really good chunk of damage as well to the Groudon, so you're in a good position. However, Regieleki at this point, it really can only get damage off onto the Grimmsnarl on the opposite side of the field. It's got one more turn of max left. This game has been really moving quite quickly. Lots of big knockouts on either side. But I do think if you're Narawitch, game's not over yet. You've still got to deal with this Groudon and the Grimmsnarl. They can set up a light screen on this turn for your big special attacker in the back. You at least have weather control as well because they're down to their final 2 Pokemon. And again, that that amount of damage that Max Lightning was able to do, thanks to the terrain already being set up as well, I think is something that if Yale goes for that kind of damage with a Max Lightning, he may want to not go for the Scary Face, but then you're still at the threat of being knocked out. It's kind of a weird trade-off. Kyogre coming in, though, does change up that weather. Gonna mean another Scary Face to slow down this Regieleki. Regieleki, though, has been moving pretty quickly either way. Precipice Blades will connect, and even actually is able to hang on thanks to that little bit of extra Dynamax HP. Going for a Max Lightning, we know that it's holding that Life Orb, so that means that this Life Orb will knock out the Regieleki, but it got that knockout that it needed. It has taken the Grimmsnarl off of the field. Grimmsnarl not able to do anything beyond going to slow down that Dynamax Pokemon, and that means that this Kyogre next turn is going to be free to click some Water Spouts. Incineroar is going to be able to Fake Out, especially if it's that Assault Vest variant on the Groudon, and without a light screen to protect it, that means that Narawitch has put this game state and this board state in his favor for the end of the game.
It's absolutely amazing what we have seen come out from that turn. The live on that 6 HP may be a calculation that has been refined over and over again. That Scary Face was very annoying, but now we have Narawitch just sat here. Just go for a Fake Out just to, get a bit of the speed going down just in case, Water Spout doesn't get that knockout. We have seen some HP go down, but with that rain, it is not enough. And Groudon will drop. And we see Narawitch is going to go and take it to a game 3. So we're going to see another long game here. Both of these players and both of these teams are really wanting that spot in the finals. And Thailand could be toppling France within 3 games only.
There is a lot to say about the abilities of both of these teams, but we have been treated to already 2 game 3s, and I think that this game 3 as well is going to be really pivotal because if Thailand can get up 3-0 over France, that makes the rest of their state look incredibly comforting because then you only have to kind of win one more after that. But I mean, I think it becomes a little bit difficult, right? Because now you're forcing these game 3s. You're getting a lot of information, which is good for both sides. It really is. But I think the lack of mental break that some of these players may be getting by playing these long games is really frustrating. One thing that was interesting, though, was how quick that game 2 went. It was only a couple of turns, right? That Regieleki was in Dynamax pretty much that entire game, I think, except for like one final turn, and that Regieleki Dynamaxed on that first turn. So having that good lead and that good lead security really, I think, changed up the gameplay in itself. You may have to try and see if you're on Yale's side, if you have a better Dynamax option in something like that Groudon, if maybe you leave the Thundurus as a Pokemon to Wild Charge and kind of move around so that you're not taking that knockout on that first turn and losing a Dynamax option, which I think Narawitch played well by knowing that he could really sacrifice his restricted for a better board state.
Yeah, and sacrificing restrictors is something that you often have to do. We often see like the Incineroar for the Zacians, sacrifice. We just see something super big like your own one going down, just bring your own one back in. We do see the Intimidate coming out straight away, so Yale probably kind of sussing out that it is going to be that physical form of Yveltal, so probably trying to nullify that straight away. But we do see the same thing we saw in the previous match, where game 1, game 2 you go for the same, and game 3 you go for that very big mind game of you put your Pokemon in very fast, you change it up in the back. So, your opponent thinks, oh, you've brought the same 4, I've got to bring something that beats that 4, but you have that lead straight away where you're actually bringing something completely different. Amoonguss, it's not really going to stop these Pokemon off the bat. It's going to have a bit of a time to wait with its spores, but it can start redirecting things like parting shots if it wants to. But both these Pokemon not revealing safety goggles, just yet though, can be put to sleep. And Yveltal looks very nice going into these two Pokemon. You can maybe switch it out, get your Kyogre in pretty quickly, nullify that special attack drop, which we do see. This Incineroar comes in, which is nice to support the Amoonguss. The Flare Blitz won't knock it out just as easily. And any sort of like Spirit Breaks coming out from that Grimmsnarl, should they be coming out, are be doing less damage. As you see, Protect, just to kind of give Amoonguss a bit of time to read what can go on around it. And you see a Light Screen come out straight away from the Grimmsnarl on the opposing side, meaning that, maybe just kind of cover every base possible. Just like, maybe I do know it's special, maybe I don't. And it also just covers for the Kyogre in the back.
Yeah, I think at one point too, right? If you're Yale, you know that you can't Scary Face where that Yveltal was. So Narawitch had a pretty free switch into something that wasn't going to get any sort of prankster dealings on that side. And also by bringing in the Incineroar, you also show as well that you've got two dark types on the opposite side of the field that, that there is not going to be a lot for the Grimmsnarl on the opposite side of the field to maybe deal with. So setting up those screens is a really safe bet. By protecting the Amoonguss as well, you may just trying to be stop the fake out, but there wasn't really a fake out opportunity. And by now having this Incineroar still on the field, instead of getting that parting shot off, Yale's kind of still stuck in that turn 1 game state. Like, he still has the opportunity now, thanks to those screens, to maybe take some hits a little bit better. But sending Grimmsnarl out now makes a lot of sense. You've only really got the option to set a screen possibly, and now sending Thundurus in is something that can maybe deal with some more damage. Fake out from one Incineroar onto the other, from Narawitch's onto Yale's. Amoonguss able to go for a Spore, and getting the Spore on this switch in is absolutely huge, because now this Thundurus is on the back foot.
Yeah, Thundurus going into that Spore slot was a very good call by Narawitch, because no matter what was there, if you put the Grimmsnarl to sleep, that's less screens going up. But catching such a powerful Pokemon and offensive presence that threatens your team with that Spore is absolutely amazing. Incineroar winning that speed tie, well, not even the speed tie strike, even coming on this turn, just getting that fake out off, meaning that there's less scare going down. Throat Chop going into Narawitch's Incineroar means no parting shots, but do you really need those in front of what's on the field here? Flare Blitz goes into the Thundurus. It takes a lot of damage. Of course, it can't be burned because of the effects of the hacks. And we just see that the Spore will go into Incineroar as well, revealing no safety goggles. And it's going to be a nice little sleepover on that side of the field, while these two Pokemon can just, sit here happily and just click moves as and where they want them, and not be too scared of the damage coming out for either of them.
The no safety goggles on the Incineroar is absolutely huge, right? Because then you at least maybe have confirmation that it may be something similar to a Sugar Berry that I believe your own Incineroar might have, if I'm not mistaken. But at that point too, you've put both of these Pokemon to sleep. Yale has currently, his own Thundurus hasn't woken up as of yet, and this Flare Blitz is going to get that knockout. That is a huge boon. A critical hit, what we saw, would not matter because of how much damage that did on the first one, but you're still going to take some recoil damage. The Incineroar on Yale's side is going to force to stay asleep. Another Spore just to kind of ensure that if that Thundurus did wake up, that it would be put back to sleep as well. This Amoonguss has the opportunity now. It can Pollen Puff into that Incineroar on the opposite side, or on its next side next door to it if it wants to. Maybe just get some extra HP up, or you could go for a Pollen Puff on the opposite side of the field. You also have another free opportunity to click Spore onto this Groudon as well. You can even click Parting Shot onto the Groudon as well if the Incineroar on the opposite side doesn't wake up and get something off like a Throat Chop, which would probably be Yale's best bet, right? Because if you can prevent something like Parting Shot from going off into the Groudon, then your Groudon is a little bit more comfortable, but the Parting Shot would be a great option because then you would lower the attack and you would be able to send your Kyogre in, and your Kyogre can maybe try and get a lot of damage off in the next few turns.
Yeah, Kyogre coming in here from a possible parting shot would be absolutely amazing from Narawitch. Of course, we could also see Yveltal come in just to maybe try and catch off guard, any weather wars, and also just get that flying type of a natural immunity, as we do see a Dynamax is coming out from what is likely the Groudon here. And given, that it is going to be forced into single targets, maybe the Sugar Berry isn't going to be as effective. If not, we could just be seeing a Fire Punch into that pesky little Amoonguss, just getting rid of it so no more sleeps and no more slow down turns for the rest of the game. Protect, though, coming out from the Amoonguss, possibly predicting that could be what is going down, as we do see Max Rockfall comes through, so completely avoiding that Sugar Berry. Will it be enough, given it's not stab? And it is enough. Incineroar isn't going to get that ability to switch. And we are going to see, Yveltal is now has to be worried of a max rockfall, and Kyogre has to be worried about another weather wall, even forced to switch because you can set up the rockfall. You can either go for a fire punch into it, which is now max flare. It'll be weakened, but you'll get that boost, to drop the rain boost damage. So many different mind games going on. Of course, the speed straight away from the Kyogre is going to be a presence, but also the light screen can just go straight back up where it has gone down as the Grimmsnarl came in.
Yeah, that light screen going down is actually incredible timing for that Grimmsnarl to come back and onto the field. The Amoonguss, I think, is interesting, right? Because the max rockfall, what that covers as well is if that Amoonguss is the Focus Sash, is the Focus Sash variant that we've seen before. Because then if you go for that max rockfall, you've broken the Focus Sash, you can go for a max flare possibly on the next turn to get some extra damage off. Or at that point too, then you're changing the weather in comparison so that the max geysers from this Kyogre would not have nearly as much a potential for a physical output. But Kyogre getting its Dynamax up at this point, I think, is a really good option because you know that there is nothing in the back that is going to put a big threat on you like that Thundurus, because Thundurus is already off of the field. You have a free opportunity to really click Max Geyser. If your Amoonguss feels threatened as well, you can send that out, bring in something else possibly to try and maybe help to mitigate the damage. You can't bring that Incineroar in because it is knocked out, but this light screen is going to help against this Kyogre with that Max Geyser, but it's still in the rain. We know in the back that it's holding Mystic Water, but so that does well over 50%. Would have done a really nice chunk especially, but Max Quake at this point, another way to boost your special defense, and it is great to target down. Even into that Kyogre, you do a really nice chunk of damage. Kyogre can still take, I believe, 2 more of those, so that means at this point, even though you have 1 more turn of Dynamax after this, you can still handle something like a Max Geyser, but a Spore is going to put that right to shame. The Spore at this point, putting the Groudon to sleep so that even if something like that Grimmsnarl went for a Scary Face into that Kyogre, it doesn't really matter because Groudon's got at least 1 more guaranteed turn of sleep, and you can Pollen Puff the Pokemon to your left, really being that Kyogre, and try and boost some of that HP up that you may have lost this turn.
Yeah, be able to boost up, just knowing Pokemon are asleep and get that HP back over and over again means Water Spouts, once the Kyogre goes back to its base form, is going to be a very powerful move. Of course, though, options just go for a defensive play, get things to sleep, even through a light screen and that special defense boost. We do see add a crit. Oh, that could have mattered. That could have mattered for Narawitch there. So Yale is forced to lose that weather control, and the Zacian, I believe it's still asleep. Spirit Break is going to be kind of nice because it gives another little, I guess, indirect special defense boost on your side of the field. But we just see there's going to be another little nap time on Yale's side of the field, this time in the Grimmsnarl, and that means there's going to be no more Spirit Breaks. But Light Screen, once it goes down, is likely going to be stalled out even further. And we have to see what comes from this, as we do see the Incineroar coming in. It is asleep, and it's not going to like taking this shower. Cats never like having a bath in the water, especially one that is fire type. And with the 2 Pokemon on the field, Kyogre is rubbing its fins together. It is super excited, especially with that Pollen Puff from the Amoonguss by its side.
Yeah, the Amoonguss has done exactly what it's wanted to, and it's done it mainly unchallenged. It really hasn't taken much damage. I think if you were Yale, you may have had to prioritize more doing damage to that Amoonguss before it put everything to sleep, but once it started getting those spores off, then it was kind of lights out at this point. I mean, literally, right? Max Geyser, even with that special attack drop and the light screen on the opposite side of the field, does enough to get that Incineroar knocked out and off of the field at this point. It means it's just this Grimmsnarl who is going to stay asleep for this turn. Amoonguss can just Pollen Puff right into that Kyogre. That Kyogre as well. Rain's not going to last forever. However, it is going to be pretty nice to have for at least the next turn if it wants to go for something like another Water Spout. Again, you're dealing with a light screen, you're dealing with a special defense boost and a special attack drop, but unless this Grimmsnarl can consistently put out enough damage without getting put to sleep, I think at that point it's going to be pretty much over, right? You can still Rage Powder if you're Amoonguss and take those Spirit Breaks away from the Kyogre. But yeah, that is a huge win for Narawitch. Yale showing that he did forfeit there, wrapping up the game before bringing it into a longer end game that probably wouldn't have been terribly fruitful. However, the great thing about that now is that Thailand is currently up 3-0. And again, we're watching these in the order that they were played, and I obviously do not know the result. So it's very exciting for me thinking how Thailand, who did do the same exact thing to Poland and Japan, they get those they started 4-0 against Japan. Japan won the last 3, but they also did something very similar to Poland as well and just got early wins and just immediately took control over the games.
Yeah, and it's just showing that powerhouse they are, and they've kept doing this over and over again, especially in these final stages. And it's going to put that pressure on. And France, they know what it's like to have that really big deficit to start off with. Like I said earlier in the stream, they had that big deficit to Mexico, and they had a really big one in the season of 2021. And they've got further than they did. So maybe it's going to be a little bit less of a burn, but they have the stamina, they have the knowledge to pull back from this drop. They've all been game freeze, so we know they can take a game. They know they can push it to a very late game as well. All of them have come down to those last turns. And luckily, we've seen maybe a bit of hacks in favor or just outright just like calls, and Thailand are showing why they're in this stage. So it's going to be a close one. And, I really don't know who is going to be, even with this 3-0 lead from Thailand.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so safe for Thailand at this point, but you know that the French team, of course, they wouldn't have gotten to the top four if they weren't immensely talented. All four teams have truly incredible talent and a lot of stamina just to have made it this far into the competition. So there is definitely a lot to be said for these French players. A player up next, Adam, definitely I think has a lot of pressure on his shoulders, going to be fighting against Gun K Sawthorn. So at this point, guys, we will be taking another short break, but we will be coming back with a game that will be match point for Thailand. So it could be really interesting, and you do not want to go anywhere. So stick around with us.